How was this Georgia man able to convince Union generals not to burn down his town? And let's find out more about him and how he did it on episode 24 of Georgia History Today. Joshua Hill was born in 1812 and raised in northwestern South Carolina. He migrated to Monticello, Georgia around 1830 during the cotton boom of central Georgia. In Monticello, he practiced law alongside his brother and began acquiring large tracts of land. Joshua Hill married Emily Reed before relocating his practice to the more prosperous railroad town of Madison in the late 1840s. They had 8 children after they moved to Madison. By 1860, Joshua Hill had become one of Morgan County's leading citizens, with a fine in-town home and a large plantation south of Madison. Hill owned 59 enslaved laborers and over 2,000 acres of land. Hill is said to have had a strong Whig and Unionist principles, which aligned him with the Whig Party until that organization dissolved in Georgia. Hill then became a member of the American Party, also known as the Know Nothing Party. The Know Nothing Party, in his congressional district, nominated Hill to run for the United States House of Representatives from Georgia in 1857. It was under that banner he was elected. Hill was re-elected to a second term in 1859. In the 1860 presidential campaign, Hill helped organize the Constitutional Union Party and served on its national committee. After Abraham Lincoln's election, Hill denounced secession from Washington and criticized Governor Joseph E. Brown for his seizure of Fort Pulaski. For this stance, he incurred the wrath of most Georgia press and suffered hanging in effigy in at least one town. On January 21st, 1861, the Ordinance of Secession was publicly signed by a ceremony in Georgia by Georgia politicians. 2 days earlier, delegates at the convention in Milledgeville, which was the capital, voted 208 to 89 for the state to secede from the Union. When secession came, Georgia's congressional delegation resigned in unison, except Hill, who submitted a separate resignation letter that did not acknowledge succession. In 1863, he made an unsuccessful bid for the governorship. The American Civil War campaign that concluded the Union operations in the Confederate state of Georgia was called the Sherman's March to the Sea in November through December of 1864. After seizing Atlanta, Union General Sherman embarked on a scorched earth campaign intended to cripple the South's war-making capacity and wound the Confederate psyche. Sherman's army marched 285 miles east from Atlanta to the coast town of Savannah, which surrendered without even a siege. After abandoning Atlanta, Confederate Lieutenant General John Bell Hood surprised the Federals by heading north in hopes of cutting the railroad, forcing Sherman to retreat from Atlanta to protect his supply line. Sherman's army was freed of opposition, so it could make its march to the sea. Sherman had determined that he could sever his supply lines and march to Savannah, literally living off the land. In his march to the sea, railroads were a special target. After Sherman's army passed by railroad, all that was left were the embankments. In 1864, Hill was elected mayor of Madison, Georgia. During the later stages of the Civil War, Hill lost his son during the Atlanta campaign in fighting near Lithonia, Georgia. When Hill went to retrieve his son's body, he stopped to speak with General William T. Sherman with a request that the Union troops under Sherman's command not burn down the town of Madison, which was on the path of Sherman's march to the sea. While Sherman agreed, The portion of his troops to pass through Madison were under the command of subordinate General Henry Warner Slocum. Two divisions marching into Madison numbered approximately 10,000 soldiers, were accompanied by the 20th Corps commander, Brigadier General Alpheus S. Williams, and Major General Henry W. Slocum, commanding the left wing of General Sherman's army. When the wing of Sherman's march to the sea passed through Madison on November 18, 1864, Hill went out to meet the Union officers and urge restraint. This episode led to stories that Hill saved Madison. Hill's plantation, about 6 miles south, however, was thoroughly sacked, probably by bummers. Foragers attached to the Sherman's army. To this day, the original foundation and some of the brick walls of the Madison Depot, burned by federal troops, are still evident in the existing structure. It was one of the first brick depots on the Georgia Railroad from Augusta to Atlanta, making it a center for trade and also a target for Sherman's march to the sea. Federal soldiers set the depot ablaze, torching the water tank, ripped up cross ties, and demolished the switching station. They burned warehouses holding over 100 bales of cotton and demolished stores, taking what they wanted before piling excess in the streets for burning. Others ransacked corn cribs, barns, and outbuildings, threatening houses with their occupants. When General Slocum learned that the soldiers had stolen a sterling communion service from the Presbyterian Church, he ordered it returned. He then posted guards at every house to prevent looting. Madison left a favorable impression on the men of the 20th Corps. One soldier wrote to his wife later that the town was as near a paradise as anything I ever saw. Another recalled that he found it the prettiest village I've ever seen in the state. A third commented, "The buildings in Madison are almost all first class. Some of them are very elegant. We see here numerous evidence of taste and refinement." In 1868, the state legislature deadlocked in its Senate selection between Democrat Stevens and Joseph Brown, who was then affiliated with the radical Republican faction. The body chose Hill, a moderate Republican, as a compromise. Before Hill was seated, the Georgia legislature expelled its black members. In consequence for this and other actions, Congress refused to seat the state's delegation. Following 2 years of hearings, delays, and compromise, Hill took his seat in 1871 and served the remainder of his term to 1873. As a senator, Hill pursued a course between conservative Democrats and radical Republicans. He endorsed black voting and favored civil rights for freed people, but only on a segregated basis. By 1873, white Democrats again dominated the Georgia General Assembly, and Hill was replaced by a Confederate hero, Major General John B. Gordon. Not until 1980 did Georgia elect another Republican to the Senate. Hill became the senior statesman of Georgia Republicans. But with the party diminished by Reconstruction's end, he had little political power. His last prominent political role was a delegate to the state's 1877 Constitutional Convention. Hill was a man of political influence. He never joined the Confederation. His appeals likely saved the town of Madison. If you enjoyed today's story, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't want to miss the next episode of Georgia History Today. See ya.